Welcome back to SM Sports Radio. We've got a good show for you guys this week. We're going to be going through our winners and losers of the month in the MLB, our team of the month in the MLB, talking about the Big 12 this year in college football, kind of seeing what we think will go on in that league this year. We're going to be talking about EA's team ratings that got released, the top 25 teams in college football 25. Going to be talking some NBA free agency and then rounding it out with a little bit of NHL free agency as well. But how has your week been, Samuel?
Pretty good week. I'm kind of in a period of mourning because this is one of the times where there's not many sports going on. Obviously, we're big baseball fans.
Become a motorsports fan. It makes it so much better.
I'm sure it does. I don't think I can add more sports to my plate. Anyone who knows me knows that is probably not a good addition to my life. But I respect your love and your analysis of motorsports, and I've been tuning into your Game Time Decision podcast.
Yeah, quick shout out to the Game Time Decision podcast, me and Keegan Miller, also on YouTube.
But yeah, I'm just ready for number one, the college football game to come out in the next couple weeks or so, 2.5 weeks or so. As we've hit July, but more importantly, I'm looking forward to the end of August when we can play some real football again.
Yeah, I am so ready for football to start. I have kind of that summer football itch that I always start to get. I know baseball's great, but I'm so ready for football to be back. But speaking of baseball, we'll start off with the MLB and our winner and loser of the month. And my winner is going to be the New York Mets. The Grimace memes have been everywhere. Everyone knows what the Mets have been doing this month. They are 16-7 in the month of June and went from 4th to 3rd in their admittedly difficult division, the NL East, but have put themselves right on a wild card spot right now. They're really fighting for it. They're kind of close in that conversation. If I'm not wrong, I think they're just out of one with the Mets right now, or the Cardinals right now. The Cardinals have overtaken them, but the Mets kind of right in there in that wild card hunt, and earlier this month they were the 3rd worst team in the entire National League. So a great rebound from the New York Mets, as that's a team that a lot of their fans have given up, as Mets fans tend to do, because being a Mets fan can be pretty painful at times. But they've really pulled it back in June. I don't know if they'll be able to keep it going in July or not, but it's made it really interesting, especially for guys who we thought might get traded, like Pete Alonso on this team. Now you're not so sure if those guys get moved, but the Mets are my winner for the month of June.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good selection. We've talked a lot about the Braves maybe having an opportunity to whittle away the division lead that the Phillies have built throughout the first 2.5-3 months of the season, but the Mets are creeping up on the Braves as well, and so I'm all for that. The Grimace memes were great. I will co-sign on that. But my winner of the month is the Houston Astros, who have whittled the Seattle Mariners division lead over in the AL West from 6.5 games to just 3 games. Part of that has to do with my loser of the month, which I'll get to in a second. But the Astros have been on a tear in the month of June, 17-8 in the month of June. They've gotten key contributions from Alex Bregman, Jose Altuve, Yordan Alvarez, and Yanir Diaz, all with OPSs over 800, which is kind of that target that you're looking for. If your OPS is over 800, you're an above-average hitter. We like above-average hitters. 4-1 lineup in the month of June. That really stuck out to me. And then on the pitching side, we talked about it off the air. Hunter Brown's been exceptional over his past few starts for the Astros, including his July 1st start, which obviously doesn't factor in just the month of June. He had a point, including the start on July 1st. He has a .97 ERA in 6 starts, 37 innings pitched, and 41 strikeouts. So
yeah, it's been very impressive.
He's kind of been the anchor of that starting rotation this month, and because of that, they've kind of been able to chip away at this division lead. I preseason picked the Astros to win this division, and it's really just been the Mariners all season,
which I've been happy about, because
due in large part to their pitching, and here the Astros come just chipping away at that lead, like I said, and I would not be surprised to see it come down to these two teams in the last week of the season, just with how strong Seattle's pitching is. But then I think Houston's pitching is just a couple steps behind, and I think the Houston offense is just light years better than the Mariners, which we'll get to in a second.
I was about to say, you want to go ahead and tell us your loser of the month? Yeah, segue off of that.
My loser of the month. I did not do this intentionally, by the way. It just kind of happened this way. My loser of the month is just the Seattle Mariners offense. The team as a whole is batting .208 with a .298 on-base percentage and just a .364 slugging percentage. So very near the bottom in terms of league statistics over the past month, and that's been the main factor in letting the Astros cut the division lead in half. It hasn't really been a problem in terms of pitching. Their starting rotation's still been fantastic. My starting pitcher of the month is actually a Seattle Mariner, which we'll get to in a few minutes, but the Mariners offense is leaving the door wide open for these Houston Astros, and we kind of talked about a few shows ago, I can't remember exactly when it was, how you kind of felt like Julio Rodriguez was going to find himself. Well, he really still hasn't.
Yeah, he hasn't.
And in the month of June, he was even more dreadful than he was in April or May. So
they're going to need him to find himself.
He's going to need to be the catalyst for the Seattle Mariners to kind of pull away from the Houston Astros, because we know that their pitching is far superior just because of how injured Houston's starting rotation is. Their bullpen has faced some injuries. Hader has been not so great the past month. He had a 4.22 ERA in June with just 5 or 6 saves, which is much below his monthly averages. So Julio Rodriguez, for me, is kind of that guy that's going to determine, okay, are the Mariners going to be able to pull away and win this division like they really should?
Yeah, it's going to be close for sure. Rodriguez is a guy that, I know I said this before, but it feels like he's just got to figure it out eventually. And even though he hasn't at the plate, his defense is still so good that I would say he's still what's crazy to say is he probably still is the most valuable player in the lineup for this team just because of his skill in the field. But I hope their offense can find it, and I just don't know if they can at this point in the year. It's been such a bad year for him. But my loser of the month is going to be the Chicago Cubs, who have fallen off a cliff. They are 10-16 in the month. They went from second in the NL Central to last in the NL Central, and they are now the third worst team in the entire National League. The bullpen is non-existent. The hitting outside of Cody Bellinger is pretty much non-existent, and it's sad for these starters where the starting pitching is not even that bad, but just the lineup outside of it is atrocious. Only 3 or 4 players with an OPS over the 700 mark in June, which is just inexcusable for a professional baseball team. You look at guys like Christopher Morel and Dansby Swanson, who you thought would be a lot better, and while they haven't been awful, they've been right on that league average or below mark, which is not what you expect to get from those guys.
Below expectations, for sure.
Yeah, and for a team that really had aspirations of winning this division, it was an encouraging start in sense, and it's been off a cliff for the Cubs, so they are my loser of the month.
Yeah, and I know Pete Crow Armstrong's defense is exceptional. He has a lot of outs above average, but
he also has a lot of outs above average in the batter's box.
In the month of June, he was absolutely dreadful at the plate. He batted 136 with a 174 on-base percentage and an OPS of just 371.
Yeah, that's not good.
That is not good at all. Only 9 hits in 25 games. That is not going to get it done, even from an elite center fielder, which Crow Armstrong is.
Yeah, definitely not. And then I know we did winner loser of the month, but I wanted to throw in a guy who would have been my winner of the week if not for it being the end of a month. And welcome back to the Wyatt Langford propaganda segment, as he hit for the cycle on Sunday Night Baseball, the first ever player to do that, and then first Rangers rookie to hit for the cycle since I think 1985, something like that. But he's been incredible the last couple weeks. I said it all year. Wait until they start giving him a fair strike zone. Fair strike zone. And he is raking right now, especially with Corey Seager going down too. He has really kind of become the best hitter in this lineup over the last couple weeks, as crazy it is to say. And his defense out there is good enough. And there's always going to be adjustment periods for guys, especially guys that came up to the MLB level as quickly as Langford did. But he really looks to be settling in right now, and it's really encouraging to see. But moving on to our actual team of the month now, we're going to start with starting pitchers appropriately. So who is your starting pitcher of the month?
Yeah, so I kind of alluded to this when we were talking about winners and losers of the month. Part of the reason that Seattle hasn't fallen off a cliff entirely is because they can rely on their ace or co-ace, however you want to categorize Logan Gilbert. He had 35 and 2/3 innings pitched, in the month of June. 31 strikeouts over that span, 2 wins, 5 quality starts, a 1.51 ERA, and a .62 WHIP. So
yeah, it's pretty good.
A lot of his starts, the Mariners could just score 2 or 3 or 4 runs and feel pretty comfortable about their chances to win the game. And Logan Gilbert's numbers just really jumped out to me, especially that whip and that ERA in that sample size.
Yeah, Logan Gilbert was right up there for me as well. I went Garrett Crochet, the Chicago White Sox starter. Not seeing many Chicago White Sox on Teams of the Month list, but Crochet has been exceptional. Had 6 starts, just over 37 innings pitched, had a 1.91 ERA, but almost doubled Logan Gilbert's strikeout total with a 56 strikeout June, which is very impressive for me. Whip under 1 at .93, batting average against right over the 200 mark, and on a team where he's not getting really any help at all, to have a month like that was really impressive to me. So he is my starting pitcher of the month. As for my reliever of the month, it's going to be Carlos Estevez of the Los Angeles Angels. And all you really need to know is he pitched 10 innings, had a 0 ERA, and only allowed 2 hits.
Yeah, had 8 saves over that span. Carlos Estevez is also my relief pitcher of the month. .2 whip is not bad at all.
No, and .0 just flat 0 ERA is even better.
And no walks either.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane from him. Only a 0.65.
Will he be moved at the deadline?
He might be. He basically allowed a Pete Crow Armstrong every time he stepped up to the plate.
Yeah.
So very impressive from Estevez. Then the Angels just keep on coming for me, which is not something I thought I'd be saying, but it's catcher Logan O'Hoppe, who has been incredible this month. Slash line of 324, 363, 608. 6 doubles, 5 bombs, yet only 12 RBIs because the Angels. But he has been exceptional. A pretty good defensive catcher as well. Not elite by any means, but serviceable, definitely. And the power numbers from him, I think, are even better than people really expected from him as a prospect. He's really been hitting exceptionally well for the Angels. So in a lineup where he's not really going to have much protection at all, especially with Mike Trout injured right now, I think that he was the most impressive catcher for me this month.
For me, it was also in the AL West, and it was Yanir Diaz, the catcher for the Houston Astros. He batted .363 in the month of June with a .377 on-base percentage and a .575 slug. 29 hits over that span, 8 extra base hits, 4 home runs, 18 RBIs. And if you add up the last 2 hitting stats that I gave you in terms of the numbers, he has a .952 on-base percentage plus slugging percentage in that month of June. So certainly it could have gone either way with O'Hoppe and Diaz. I gave Diaz the lean here just because I feel like he's been one of the catalysts, if not the main catalyst offensively. He probably takes a backseat a little bit to Yordan Alvarez, but I think he's a big reason why the Astros were able to kind of cut into that Mariners division lead. So that's ultimately what pushed Diaz over the top for me.
Yeah, and Diaz has been a good hitter for a while. Isn't it crazy to think that for much of last year he spent time on the bench because of Martin Maldonado? Yeah. I know he's good defensively, but still, based on the seasons they're having right now, that is pretty insane. Then moving on to first base, I know a lot of people are going to be expecting Bryce Harper here. For me, it is Vlad Guerrero Jr. Slash line of 318, 354, 607. Had 7 doubles, had 8 home runs, which is more than Bryce Harper, and he did it in less games and less plate appearances. So that's pretty impressive from Vlad Jr. for me. Also had 24 RBIs, and for a guy that only had 4 home runs on the year coming into June, to put up 8 in a month has been just exactly what this Blue Jays team needed.
Yeah, and I went Harper. Obviously, Guerrero with some of those flashier numbers in terms of had 1 more home run in less games, all that. For me, part of the fact was that I was just keeping track with the Phillies, as Braves fans do that are in second place and kind of root for the Phillies to lose. And it seemed like every single time that the Phillies were in a vulnerable position, Bryce Harper would just get a clutch extra base hit to extend the lead. And his OPS about 100 points higher than Guerrero's over this stretch. Certainly could have gone either way, like a lot of these will and have. But I went Harper, 374 batting average, 452 on base, and a 714 OPS in the month of June.
Yeah, obviously Harper's been incredible this season. One of the front runners for NL MVP right now, and deservedly so. Then at second base, I actually get to talk about a Cincinnati Reds player, and that is Jonathan India, Gator great as well. It's a great guy for me to be player of the month. Super excited, but 380 batting average, 454 on base, 587 slug, 13 doubles in a month, which is mostly because he can't hit the ball over the wall a lot. Only 2 home runs, but was tearing the cover off the baseball. It felt like every game he had a ball that was 105 or more off the bat. Was really the only guy hitting for multiple weeks on this Reds team. Single-handedly won us multiple games. Had 16 RBIs in the month as well, and just it's hard to explain what that meant to a team who really couldn't hit for a lot of June, to just have a guy that originally was in the 8 spot in the order and kind of just floundering for a lot of the season. Then TJ Friedel goes down. He gets inserted into the leadoff spot after already being hot for about a week, and then just got even hotter. He has been incredible for the Reds this month.
Yeah, and I was kind of between Jonathan India and Ketel Marte here. They're kind of 1A, 1B. Figured that Micah could provide you some better analysis in terms of Jonathan India as Micah watches every Reds game. So
not that you could tell.
So I went Ketel Marte, who also had a pretty good month, batted .341 in the month of June with a .431 on base percentage and a .637 on base plus, or .637 slugging percentage, excuse me. So that OPS over 1,000, 7 home runs in the month, 20 RBI, 31 hits, and 6 of those being doubles.
Yeah, Marte's been really impressive all year long for sure. I'd still give him my all-star vote right now, but India, I think, is making some noise for sure.
For sure.
Then over at the hot corner at third base, it's going to be Rafael Devers for me of the Boston Red Sox. Hit 300 even on the month, 359 on base, 656 slug, 4 doubles, 2 triples, which was really weird. Devers is not a speed guy at all. So 2 triples, I think, is very impressive for him. Then also 8 bombs and 19 RBIs. He's really settled into his own this month for a Red Sox lineup that's really needed it.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, staying in the American League, it was Royce Lewis, who batted .259 with a .326 on base and a .624 slugging percentage. Hit 9 home runs in the month of June, 15 RBI, 22 hits, and 4 doubles. A lot of these came when he was as the DH, but figured since there's a DH that was a little better, I would put him at third base, as he did play some games at third base in the month of June. Definitely a great month from Devers, but I went Royce Lewis.
Yeah, definitely fair. Then at shortstop, this is a guy that we're not going to be splitting hairs on.
No.
And that is Baltimore's Gunnar Henderson, which just wow. 342 average, 432 on base, 649 slug, 11 doubles, 8 bombs, 17 RBIs, and also just for fun, 6 stolen bases. This is a guy who is still very young, and a lot of this Orioles core is young, obviously, but Henderson has just been on another level this season, has really been right up there competing for the MLB league lead in home runs most of the year. It was announced today that he's actually going to be in the home run derby this year, which is going to be super entertaining. I'm looking forward to that for sure. But Gunnar Henderson, really, what more can you say at this point in the year? He's been incredible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 6 stolen bases to go along with 39 hits. I'd say that's a pretty good month.
Yeah, definitely.
And all those power numbers that you already mentioned. So Gunnar Henderson was also my shortstop of the month.
Kind of had to be at this point. Yeah. Then moving into the outfield, we're going to start in left, and it's going to be Brandon Nimmo for me of the Mets. Hit 315, 406 on base, 598 slugging, 6 doubles, 1 triple, 6 bombs, 21 RBIs. Not the most overwhelming numbers by any means, but I know you mentioned this earlier, talking about Yainer Diaz kind of carrying the Astros. Brandon Nimmo has really been the spark for the Mets in their incredible June. So I think the numbers being as good as they were, plus that, warranted him a spot in my team of the month.
For me in left field, it's Stephen Kwan, who batted .374 with a .436 on base and a .582 slugging percentage. Hit 4 home runs, which some people would look at 4 home runs besides Stephen Kwan's name and wonder if that was the season total.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that is his season total. But he did hit 4 home runs in the month of June along with 34 hits. So just a hit machine, 12 RBIs over that span, and 7 doubles. So I felt like Stephen Kwan did enough to earn my starting left fielder spot on my team of the month.
Yeah, definitely deserves that spot as well. Outfield is so good this year. It feels like there's a bunch of guys you could jump in here every month. But the next 2 guys we are both in agreement on, so I will tell you all about our center fielder, then I'll toss it to you for right field. But center field is going to be Aaron Judge. Just obviously, he hit 409. And the on base was over 500 at 514, had an 864 slugging percentage. And I don't know if you guys are good at math. I'm not. But the OPS, I believe, is over 1,300 there for Aaron Judge on the month. Had 5 doubles, a triple, and 11 bombs. 37 RBIs, which is an absurd number. Over an RBI per day.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about the greatness of Aaron Judge a lot on the podcast recently, and it's honestly pretty warranted because you think about that historic 2022 AL MVP season where he breaks the home run record in the American League. Well, he's on pace for a better season in every batting statistical category here in 2024. And we've talked about in past shows how this guy seems like one of the most surefire Hall of Famers, just if you look at a player right now, and he's only gotten better since we said that.
Yeah, it's insane.
So absolutely deserved from Aaron Judge. He's also my starting center fielder, and it's going to be a nice race between he and Gunnar Henderson for AL MVP, I think. I think it's going to be those two guys. If Judge keeps these numbers up, it's not going to be much of a race.
Yeah.
I think Gunnar Henderson could make a push at him if Judge regresses at all. But anyway, other places in Baltimore's lineup, Anthony Santander in right field. He is our right fielder of the month. In June, he batted .264 with a .314 on base, .646 slug, belted 13 home runs. So pretty hard to leave a guy out of your team of the month that hit more home runs in the month of June than Aaron Judge did. 13 home runs from Anthony Santander, 26 RBI, 29 hits, and 3 doubles in an Orioles lineup that it seems like they have different baseballs than the rest of the remaining teams in Major League Baseball. I was watching one.
There's AL East baseball, and there are other baseballs.
You might be onto something there. I was watching, I think it was last Wednesday. I can't remember who hit it, but it was a ball that looked like it had no chance to get out, even if you disregard like juice baseballs, not juice baseballs, dead baseballs. I was like, man, he just missed that off the bat. Like, that's going to be a fly out, maybe to the warning track. It sailed over the fence. So the Orioles have a lot of things going for them this season. Obviously, to have 2 players of the month in your lineup in Henderson and Santander, pretty incredible.
Yeah, well, that's the award they're working for the most is the SM Sports Radio Player of the Month. Yes. That's the one that really stands out. And then our DH here is obviously Shohei Ohtani, 293, 413, 697 slash line, 4 doubles, 12 bombs, 24 ribbies. Just an incredible month for the Dodgers DH. Pretty much as always, he's really locked in right now. Could be the first DH to ever win league MVP, which would be really impressive if he manages to do that.
Looking pretty good, especially with Bryce Harper missing some time now with the hamstring on the injured list. I think the gap between Ohtani and everyone else is kind of just growing as we sit here today.
Yeah, definitely. And then finally, we wanted to each give our honorable mention here for a guy that we felt deserved a spot, just for whatever reason didn't make it on. And for me, it's going to be Fernando Tatis Jr. And I know he missed some time this month, but he was incredible. Had a .365 average, 427 on base, 635 slug, 5 doubles, 5 home runs, yet only 7 ribbies to show for it, which is not very good. These Padres hitters not really getting on in front of him when Fernando hits one deep. But that plus his outstanding defense in right field, I think definitely warranted a spot on this list despite missing time. So he's my honorable mention.
Yeah, another guy who deserved a shout, at least for me, was Jarren Duran. With a .365 batting average in the month of June, 420 on base, 636 slugging percentage, 6 home runs, 16 RBI, 9 stolen bases as well.
Yeah.
39 hits in the month of June, 7 doubles, and 2 triples. So those offensive numbers jumped off the page.
That's where a lot of Rafael Devers' 19 RBIs came from.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, that is our team of the month for June. We will have another one at the end of July, obviously, because that's how months work. Don't know if you guys are familiar with calendars, but that is how those things work. But quick little rundown of the divisions right quick. We kind of mentioned this already. Astros closing in on the Mariners in the AL West. Most of the other divisions kind of holding station right now. Orioles have tied the Yankees for the top spot. And that's pretty much the only real big movement in the division, so we figured we'd give y'all our team of the month this week instead of a real division deep dive. But now, moving over into college football, let's talk about the Big 12. This is a league that in offseason, there's been a lot of talk about realignment and all that. Feels like the Big 12's realignment has kind of gone under the radar with the wacky additions to the ACC and then the premier additions of Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC. But the Big 12, I think, is going to be one of the more competitive leagues for years to come. So we thought we would talk you guys through a few teams who we think can be in the running for winning the Big 12 this year, starting with the Wildcats of Arizona. I'll cut this part out.
Okay. Sorry, I'm organizing my thoughts here.
Oh, good. Just let me know when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. Arizona opens the season versus New Mexico. I think we can both agree that that's a win pretty easily for them. Then Northern Arizona, another pretty easy win. But then the schedule starts to get real difficult real fast as they travel to Kansas State next. And I don't know about you, but this is a game that's been very difficult for me to pick. Kansas State is a good team for sure. I don't know that they have the same experience that this Arizona team does. So I personally am taking Arizona over Kansas State here, just very close.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to lean Arizona here just because pulled up these offensive efficiency rankings from last year. They were 5th in total offense, 6th in offensive explosive drives, 6th in offensive play efficiency, and 13th in offensive drive efficiency. So those sounds like a lot of nerdy stats, but
basically means they move the ball real good.
The top 15 in all of those categories is pretty darn good, and they're returning their starting quarterback in Noah Fafita and their number one receiver in McMillan.
Yeah, returning
70% of their total offensive production, and I think Fafita's experience is going to be the difference in this game because we all know I'm very high on Avery Johnson. He's one of my Heisman sleepers, but just doesn't have a full season of experience under his belt like Fafita does. So the fact that this game is week 3, you kind of think that, or at least I kind of think that Avery Johnson will still be settling into his own. I think he's a really talented player. I think he'll still be settling into his own a little bit at this juncture of the season. So I'm going to lean Arizona here. I'll give them a win for the purpose of this process.
Yeah, and you mentioned Tedoroy McMillan there, his number one receiver. I think that a lot of people are kind of saying foregone conclusion that Luther Burden or Tez Johnson wins the Biletnikoff this year, but don't sleep on McMillan. I think
he's going to be able to put up huge numbers because these Big 12 defenses outside of really Utah are not going to be great. And
excellent segue there, as in week 4, they travel to Utah to take on the Utah Utes. And you mentioned experience. There's not many quarterbacks more experienced than Cam Rising in college football, and Utah is a very tough place to play. I think Utah hands Arizona their first loss of the year here.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. Utah's another team that returns over 70% of its overall production on both sides of the football and got a lot of respect for that program. I think it's only going to become more dominant with the realignment, the loss of Oklahoma and Texas. I think that really just opens a pathway to teams like Utah to really stake their claim because the Big 12, as we know, still has that automatic bid to the 12-team college football playoff. So I think it's going to be between, I think teams like Utah, maybe a program on the rise like Arizona. These could be teams that kind of find themselves in this conversation year after year because it's not like you have to really compare yourselves to 5 other SEC teams. If you just take care of business and win this conference, you're in the college football playoff. And I think that the favorites to do that are going to be Utah and Arizona. And I agree that the fact that this game is at Utah, I think that is going to give them the victory here for me.
Yeah, definitely. Then few easy games here for them. Texas Tech at home, take care of business easily. At BYU, I think it'd be a potential trap game because that's a tough place to play, but I think they get that done. I think they murder Colorado. Then the first real interesting one for me here, it's 2 in a row right here actually. Last game of October and first game of November for them, as they get West Virginia at home versus Garrett Green and that Mountaineers team. I think that could be an interesting game. I think they're definitely good enough to beat West Virginia, especially at home though. That was in Morgantown. I might lean Mountaineers, but give me Arizona at home there. Then at UCF, Arizona traveling all the way to Orlando, Florida for at UCF, and what, if I'm not mistaken, is the longest possible road trip in the Big 12. It's either that or like them to West Virginia or Utah to UCF, something like that. Anyway, it's far away.
It's probably either Utah or Arizona to UCF. That's a long way.
Yeah. But anyway, Bounce House is always rocking. It's a great place to play. Gus Malzahn, always a guy that can provide an upset now and again, so I would say that's the last potential trap game on the schedule. I think they take care of business versus Houston, TCU, and Arizona State pretty easily.
So we're thinking we're kind of in the mindset of we could see 11-1 or 10-2.
Yeah, right.
In a perfect world, they could run the table. I think this team is talented enough.
It's definitely possible
to go 12-0 and run the table in terms of this schedule, but it's hard to really tell at this juncture. We don't know much about what these teams have added through the portal. We don't really know what young guys are going to emerge because we know the young guys are going to emerge if they're good enough. So it's going to be fun to see how Arizona can surround Fafita with more weapons on offense for one, and number two, see if Arizona's defense can kind of take that next step.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be right in the running there. And let's move over to Utah next. Utah gets Southern Utah, Baylor, Utah State for their first 3 games. I think that's a pretty easy 3-0, especially considering they get Baylor at home. But then at Oklahoma State might be one of the better games of the year in this league. I just don't think Utah has a good enough run defense, especially on the road, to slow down Ollie Gordon enough to win that game. So I'm going to take Oklahoma State there to hand Utah their first and maybe only loss of the year.
Yeah, I think that game is pretty much a coin flip, like you said. I think Utah's the more established program, but the fact that it's on the road and you're facing a guy that will be in the running to win the Heisman in Ollie Gordon, and you mentioned the shortcomings of that run defense of Utah. Oklahoma State is built to exploit that, obviously, with Ollie Gordon, but also up front, I think Oklahoma State's offensive line is going to be best equipped to kind of push back this Utah defensive line more so than some other teams in the Big 12 might be able to.
Yeah, Utah has a really good interior of the defensive line, but when you move out to that edge, Jonah Ellis is really a guy that, even though in the draft he more profiled as like a DPR type guy, designated pass rusher, really good off the edge in passing situations, he was still one of their anchors versus the run out there. So losing a guy like that I think is important. A safety like Cole Bishop who could kind of do everything for you, move up there, I think it's going to be a real big loss for them as well. So I don't think their run defense is bad by any means. I just think Ollie Gordon's better. But then we already talked about the game versus Arizona. Then at Arizona State versus TCU, at Houston versus BYU are all easy wins in my opinion.
And Colorado.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that next. At Colorado, I think just they're gonna get destroyed. It's gonna be
as you can tell. Micah is not very high on the 2024 Colorado Buffaloes.
No, I'm not. Then I think Utah beats Iowa State. I think that game is potentially close. You never want to have to play Iowa State late in the season. It's just the fact that it is in Utah. I think they get it done pretty easily. And then UCF on the road to end the year.
At 8 o'clock, too.
Yeah, this is a game that I think Utah might lose.
Yeah, it certainly could be a trap game, and it'll be interesting to see if Utah has dropped any games by this point. Because if you come into UCF 11-0, there's already that kind of added pressure of the undefeated season looming over your head. And
Gus Malzahn knows how to end an undefeated season at home late in the year.
And that UCF crowd is going to know what's at stake for Utah, and I think that's going to kind of give them a second wind if they would even need one in a big game like this. It'll be interesting to see how good of a year UCF has up to this game.
Yeah.
But I think regardless, it has major trap game potential, and I think Utah is going to be given a run for their money at least.
Yeah, UCF to me feels like a team that's going to end up 8-4, but with 2 wins over like top 10 teams somehow. That kind of feels like what they're going to do this year. But our second to last contender here, let's talk about Oklahoma State. And they get South Dakota State first, which if you come out not ready to play, that's a potential tripping point to start the year. South Dakota State is one of, if not the best FCS teams of the past 3 or 4 years, so got to be careful there. I still think they win that. Then they get Arkansas at home. I think they obliterate Arkansas. Arkansas's run defense allowed just bunches and hundreds of yards to Auburn last season, so you're about to get destroyed by Ollie Gordon on the road. So that's going to be a rough time for them. I think they beat Tulsa, even though it's in Tulsa. We've already mentioned the game versus Utah. Then at Kansas State. And how about this week in the Big 12? Because you get the Arizona-Utah game and the Oklahoma State-Kansas State game the same Saturday. And this at Kansas State game, I just think Oklahoma State's too good. I don't think they lose at Kansas State, but this feels like one of those typical Big 12 games that could end up with Kansas State winning. I think Oklahoma State's talent is enough.
I hear you, and I definitely could see that happening. But this is week 5 on the schedule, and I think this is plenty of time for Avery Johnson to be settled into his role as the guy for Kansas State. And if he's going to win the Heisman or be in the running for it, and if he's going to get an invitation to New York, then that's going to mean that Kansas State wins this game week 5 at home. So I'm going to ride with my guy Avery Johnson here, and I'm going to pick Kansas State to somehow neutralize Ollie Gordon. Maybe not completely neutralize, but limit him enough. And I think that Avery Johnson's going to make some plays through the air, maybe with his legs. See that flowing hair as he gallops into the end zone a few times.
That's definitely fair. I can see it happening.
This is going to have to be Avery Johnson's kind of coming out party if he's going to contend for the Heisman Trophy. So I've already told you in previous episodes how high I am on his potential. So I've got to back my guy here.
Yeah, I think that could definitely happen. I lean Oklahoma State here because of their experience. But the game I do think they drop, which might surprise some people, is West Virginia at home in Stillwater. I think West Virginia comes in and wins this game. I think Garrett Green is going to have an exceptional game here. They lost to Oklahoma State last year 48-34, but Garrett Green in that game threw for 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And you bring him back to face this team again, I think he gets him the second time. I think West Virginia's run defense, though not amazing, is good enough to at least make Oklahoma State have to consider throwing the ball. And if you get into a shootout versus this West Virginia offense, I think Garrett Green is good enough to win them that game. So I think West Virginia wins this.
And we've seen what Green can do with his legs. It was put on display for the entire country that really cares about bowl games that aren't major bowl games. He really put on a show on the ground against North Carolina.
Yeah, granted, awful defense.
But for the season, nearly 800 rushing yards and 13 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
So definitely one of those dual threat guys that I think kind of flies under the radar, doesn't get talked about as much as some of these other Big 12 quarterbacks.
Yeah, I know we talked about Heisman sleepers already, but Garrett Green, I think, not this year, but next year, I think Garrett Green ends up in New York. Then back to Oklahoma State. They get at BYU. I think they're good enough to win that game, although this is a weird game. It's at night on a Friday in Provo, Utah. I think this is one where the Storm and Mormons might pull the upset.
Yeah, I can see it.
I think Oklahoma State still wins. I would pick them, but I would say upset potential there. Then at Baylor, I think they win that. Then Arizona State, TCU, Texas Tech, I think they win all of those. Then at Colorado to end the year, that's going to be a murder.
Will Ollie Gordon have over or under 280 rushing yards?
I might take the over is the sad part, but I think they obliterate Colorado for sure. So kind of in that 10-2 range for Oklahoma State on the year for both of us. Then finally, West Virginia. This is a very interesting team, at least for me. We've talked about Garrett Green a lot, so let's just dive right into the schedule. I think they beat Penn State. They get Penn State in Morgantown.
I don't like that it's a noon game. That's my only.
Okay. Here's the thing though. Garrett Green or Drew Aller?
Oh, Garrett Green.
Exactly. West Virginia wins this game.
Oh, I don't know. I think Penn State in the trenches is going to be way too much. I think
it doesn't matter.
I think West Virginia has the skill players. I think they clearly have the advantage at quarterback, but I don't know if they're going to be able to push around those boys in the trenches from Penn State.
Think of the environment this is going to be, though, in Morgantown.
I just wish I would pull the trigger if it was a night game. I can't pull the trigger at noon against Penn State week 1 because it's not going to be a game that Penn State doesn't get up for. It's week 1 of the season. They're going to be jacked up. They're going to want to prove people wrong because they've been the third fiddle in the Big Ten for years, and now they're going to be fifth fiddle when you add Oregon and Washington. At best, they're going to be fifth fiddle. So Penn State's not going to be taken aback or be taken by surprise by West Virginia here. That's my only hesitance. If it was a night game, I always kind of lean towards the home team in night games. But the fact that it's noon, I just hate that. I'm going to go Penn State, but I could definitely see West Virginia pulling out the win.
All right. But then a couple easy wins next on the
I
calendar.
hate to rain on your parade over there. You're on a roll.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep picking West Virginia there, but then I think they beat Albany pretty easily. The at Pitt is a weird one at 3:30. That's a big rivalry game, so that one personally could go either way, even with West Virginia's superior talent. I think they beat Kansas, getting them at home despite Kansas's talent. We've already talked about the Oklahoma State game, so kind of just move past that. Then Iowa State at home, I think they win pretty easily. I think that Kansas State comes into town, though, and talk about a quarterback duel in this game.
My television will be turned to the channel that this game is on during this game, for sure.
I'm going to be taking Kansas State here. The fact that you've gotten to mid-October at this point, you talked about Avery Johnson settling in. I think that he comes in and puts on a show in this game.
Yeah,
the West Virginia secondary is not good.
No, it's very bad, and we kind of, at the end of the season last year in that bowl game against North Carolina, yes, they were far improved, but you got to remember Drake May didn't play in that game, so it's kind of a hard gauge in terms of secondary improvement. And you already hit on the fact that I think Avery Johnson is going to be settled into his role as the guy for the Kansas State Wildcats by this point. I think this one might get out of hand in Morgantown.
I don't think it gets out of hand. I think Garrett Green's good enough to keep them in it, but I think Kansas State wins. Then we've talked about the West Virginia-Arizona game already. Then Cincinnati, Baylor, UCF. I think they win all three of those, especially since they get UCF in Morgantown. That UCF game feels like it could be a game where UCF maybe comes in at like 8-2, and they're trendy UCF, and then they just get murdered in Morgantown. So I could see that happening. Then I think they beat Texas Tech pretty easily to finish off the year. So kind of that 9-3, 10-2 range for West Virginia as well. Then, just because everyone thinks they're going to do way better than they're going to, let's talk about Colorado. Colorado opens the season versus North Dakota State in Boulder, Colorado. They lose that game. They lose to North Dakota State.
That's a little extreme.
It's not.
That's a little extreme.
North Dakota State is the best FCS program right now. They are the best FCS program. They have talent. They are a very good team. Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders are not enough on their own to beat a team that I think has better overall talent in North Dakota State.
Dylan Edwards is pretty good, too, at that running back position.
Yeah, but North Dakota State has a really good run defense.
I don't know, man. I don't think I just personally, I don't have football reasons for this. I don't see a world where Colorado drops the opening game with as much hype as the media puts around them, with as much hype as the public puts around them.
Hype doesn't matter, though.
8:00 game. Well, I guess this would be not at night Colorado time, so that's a moot point there. But I don't think in Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter last season as Colorado Buffaloes, I don't think they lose to an FCS.
The rest of the team is not good enough.
Week 1. It's week 1.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens. I'm taking North.
You're going to have 6 weeks of prep just for this game, and it's it's FCS talent at the end of the day. It's FBS talent versus FCS talent.
Elite FCS talent. It's like
it is, but these FCS, like, we have the transfer portal. If they were really that elite, they'd go to a D1.
I just think North Dakota State's good enough. I don't know. Anyway, week 2, they lose at Nebraska.
Easily.
Yes.
Dylan Raiola throws for 350 this game.
Yes. So Colorado 0-2. I think they beat Colorado State. Okay, whatever. So for me, they're now 1-2 after the Colorado State.
We'll go with records at the end.
Okay. So then they lose to Baylor, I think.
Yes.
Although I think that game is close.
That's a winnable game, but
yeah, especially at home. I think that game is close. I think Baylor wins, though.
It's winnable. I'm gonna go Colorado here. I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt because I don't think they're gonna be able to find many wins past this point.
I think they get obliterated at UCF.
Maybe not obliterated, but I think they lose. Yes.
I think they get obliterated by Kansas State.
Obliterated by
Arizona. I think they beat Cincinnati.
Yeah, we'll give them that one.
I think they beat Texas Tech purely because Texas Tech has no defense, and this is a game where you could see Shedeur throw for like 400 yards.
Agreed.
Then I think they lose to Utah. I think the Kansas game is competitive, but the fact that it's at Kansas, I think Kansas wins, just because I don't think Kansas's defense is good enough to really slow them down a lot. But I think Kansas wins. I think they get murdered by Oklahoma State to finish the year.
I'm in agreement there.
So that's like maybe 3 wins.
I'm between 4 and 5 wins. I'm giving them North Dakota State, Colorado State. I'm going to give them Baylor for now. And I'm going to say they'll win 2 of these 3. UCF, Cincinnati, Texas Tech. So that would put them at 5 and 7 for me.
I'm giving them,
which I think if this team's bowl eligible, that's a miracle.
Yeah, there's just the headline talent is very good. I'm not denying that, but the rest of the team around them is just not good enough.
They just have not been able to upgrade an offensive line enough to really take that next step. They're nowhere near contending for the Big 12. And for all of you out there that have been betting on Colorado to win the national championship,
Vegas, thanks for your donation.
I encourage you to instead go to your nearest children's hospital and give them your money, because that will not be happening in any galaxy, world, or universe. So you can stop donating your money to Vegas there.
Yeah, I'm giving them wins versus Texas Tech, Cincinnati, maybe Baylor, and then Colorado State. So 3, maybe 4.
I love how Baylor's a maybe, but North Dakota State's just a straight no. They're losing.
I think North Dakota State is very good. Anyway. So that is it for our kind of Big 12 preview on the year. Let us know what you guys think. If you guys are on the Colorado train, I hope you're not, but we'll see what happens with that.
Colorado does have the most aura in college football, I'd say. Just in terms of player marketability, all that. They could be a top team in terms of aura. That's the only top 25 list they should be a part of.
Top 25 aura. I'll give you that. Fine. But speaking of top 25, let's talk about the team ratings that came out, the top 25 teams for CFB 25. A lot of these teams are fine. I see no problems, honestly, in the top 10, except for maybe LSU a little too high, but there's enough good players where I could see that overall being carried. Michigan, I'm fine with. What is Miami doing there? Florida State, I'm fine with. Honestly, A&M, purely, if you're rating based off pure talent a lot of these young players, I'm fine with A&M. Ole Miss is fine. Oklahoma, Wisconsin, USC are fine. Virginia Tech is iffy for me.
They're maybe a little too high, but
they're not terrible.
I think Virginia Tech takes a step this year.
I think if you put Virginia Tech at 85, no one's blinking an eye.
Correct.
I just think 87's a tick high. Kansas, just because of the premier talent on that team, like a Jalen Daniels, I'm okay with. I think maybe they're like Virginia Tech where it's a tick too high, but I'm fine with that. Arizona and Oklahoma State, to me, are too low, both of them at 87. Iowa, I think, is fine at 87 just because the defense is so good.
And where in the world is Kansas State?
Exactly.
Where are they?
Kansas State is a notable omission for sure. I'll tell you what the biggest robbery is, though. Where is Missouri?
Oh, my goodness.
Where on earth are the Missouri Tigers?
Wow.
If you would have asked me what is Missouri's rating on this game, I would have said 91. I would have said 91 for Missouri. They are not on this list.
Wow.
This is a team that made a New Year's Six Bowl last game. For the most part, got better, has the easiest SEC schedule of any team, could very well go undefeated, and you're telling me they are lower than Stanford, who went 3-9? No! Where is Missouri? It's inexcusable. Okay, let's see. Let's play, is Missouri better than this team? Georgia, no. Ohio State, no. Oregon, no. Alabama, yes. Texas, no. Clemson, probably not. Notre Dame, yes. LSU, yes. Penn State, yes. Utah, yes. Michigan, probably not. Miami, miles. Florida State, yes. A&M, yes. Ole Miss, yes. Colorado, miles. Oklahoma, yes. Wisconsin, yes. USC, yes. Virginia Tech, yes. Stanford, they would beat Stanford by 60. Kansas, yes. Arizona, yes. Oklahoma State, yes. Iowa, yes. So for me, they're like 7th on this list, 6th or 7th, and they're not on the list at all.
Yeah, that is a very poor omission by EA and whoever made this list, whatever team was involved in developing this list. I understand if you don't want to have them in the top 10, which you're pushing for, which I think I would put them in my top 10 as well. But to not even have them in your top 25, that I think Missouri could sue for defamation here.
Yeah, this is terrible.
I think we might be onto something here, and I don't know if it's just like a strategy to like severely underrate them, and then when they run the table, like we both think they will.
What's the strategy? All of a sudden, ratings.
All of a sudden, you have this huge surprise of a team that went 12-0 despite not being very talented, and we all know that's just not true.
No.
You're returning Brady Cook.
You have a top 5
Luther
quarterback
Burden.
in the country, the top receiver in the country.
You lose a couple corners, so I could see
and Darius Robinson and Cody Schrader.
I could see if their defense maybe doesn't make the top 25 list, but
that offense has to be at least a 95.
The top, they're not top 25 overall. You're telling me that the Missouri Tigers, coming off of a win in the bowl game against Ohio State, is not a top 25 overall team?
It's just laughable.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah, and I feel like no one's noticing the fact that Missouri is not here.
I didn't even notice until you pointed it out. That's crazy.
It's ridiculous. They're going so. How does a team that just won a New Year's Six bowl game and returns like so much of the talent, how did they go under the radar? How?
I guess Cody Schrader must have held a lot of weight with these ranking committees or whatever people these were.
I just don't know. There are a couple teams on here now that I want to talk about who I don't necessarily think should be on here. I don't think Miami's a top 25 team. No. I think that's getting carried by Cam Ward a lot.
He's going to be fun to use on the game.
Yeah, Miami I think is a fun rebuild. I think they're a fun rebuild for sure. Then let's talk about the elephant in the room that is Colorado. Just no. Travis Hunter's probably a 99 in this game or something close to that.
Probably not
95.
Probably not probably. I think he probably is a 99.
Yeah.
Because isn't he on the cover of like one of the
he's on the cover.
Deluxe editions or whatever?
Then Shadur Sanders is above a 90 for sure.
He'll be well, I think he's deservedly going to be highly rated. I think
he's a good player.
He's going to be one of the top quarterbacks this season.
Shadur Sanders is a very good player. Do not get me wrong. I just think his offensive line is made of like bags of empty chips. So there's not really much he can do about it.
Yeah, he's going to have to show off some Mahomes-like improvising this year if they're going to even become bowl eligible.
If this was a top 10 players on the team list, sure, Colorado's an 87.
Yeah,
but the entire team
if we were ranking top 25 duos, like offensive duos, they're probably in the top
Also,
12.
Where is Missouri for that?
Yeah, what are we doing?
Anyway, then, however, the worst thing on this list is the Stanford Cardinal at an 87 overall. They're the same overall as Arizona. They're the same overall as Arizona. Let's go to Stanford's schedule from last year. Let's see. Granted, Arizona beat them by 1 point. Maybe they are the same. Let me run you through Stanford's schedule last year. USC, 56-10 loss. Arizona, 1 point loss. The crazy that's what it is. They just watched the Stanford Colorado game and went, man, they beat Colorado with a huge comeback. They must be amazing.
And they're still below Colorado. Colorado's still.
Let me tell you, if that's what they did with Stanford, and they only watched this game. Elike Umanor is going to be a 9,000 overall after his 294-yard game in that game. But then Washington, they lost 42-33. Oregon State, they lost 62-17 to Oregon State. They lost 56-23 to Notre Dame. They beat Hawaii by 13. They lost to Sacramento State at home. They lost to Sac State at home. Marte Mapu's good, but he's not that good. You can't lose to Sac State at home as a Power 5 team. They lost to Oregon 42-6. They lost to UCLA 42-7. They beat Washington State by 3. They lost to Cal 27-15. I'm sorry, that is just not an 87 overall team in any way ever.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
They went 3-9.
What in the world are you drawing that conclusion from?
They lost their best player. You want to know who their best player was? It was Joshua Carty. If you've never heard of Joshua Carty, he was their kicker, and he was their best player by a mile. Eric Luminor is great, but he's probably going to be the best player on that team this year. What on earth are you smoking? Stanford at an 80. Stanford would be lucky to get a 67 overall from me. This is awful. But that's the worst thing on the list as far as teams on that shouldn't be on. The worst thing is Missouri not being on here. But Did they mix up Stanford and Missouri? They're like, oops, we put the wrong one on there.
And even Missouri at 87 overall would be criminally underrated.
I know. I told you I'd have Missouri at a 91.
Relative to these rankings, I think I would have Mizzou at an 89 minimum.
I could see that too. For me, they'd be a 91 because in reference to these other teams, where do I think they place there? And I think Missouri's better than Alabama, which I think
Alabama is the most overrated of the top 5. I think.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think Alabama. I think Oregon's properly rated here. I think Georgia and Ohio State are properly rated. Texas properly rated. I think Clemson, just specifically because of their defense and because
the defense is so
the
good.
Defense is going to be top 3, top 4 minimum.
It's totally fair, in my opinion.
And I think this leaves some room for. They're maybe expecting Cade Klubnik to take a little bit of a step for 1.
Yeah.
Number 2, a lot more wide receivers. Talented wide receivers into that room,
which
most notably TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco. And if you just watch Clemson, if you exclude the disaster turnover plays, which I know you can't just close your eyes during the turnover plays, but Clemson was
they closed their eyes watching Stanford the entire
Clemson was
year,
decent moving the ball and just had a disaster of a season in the red zone. Like it seemed like every week Clemson coughed it up twice inside the 5, which is just egregious. But Clemson showed that they can push the ball down the field. They can hang with teams that are better than them, i.e. Notre Dame last year, i.e. Florida State last year. Those were both, number 1, Clemson beat Notre Dame, and Florida State needed a strip sack and a missed 27-yard field goal just to send the game to overtime. So, I mean, Clemson's defense is going to be good enough to keep them in this conversation up at the top. I think I would have Missouri right under them. Maybe a 90. I think Missouri's a little better than Notre Dame even. So I would rearrange this list a little bit. I would go, my top 6 or 7 would be Georgia, Ohio State. This is overall. I'm not saying this is how good the teams are going to do.
But as far as overall in a video game.
Overall in a video game, I would go Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Clemson, Missouri, Alabama.
If I were doing it, I would go Georgia. I think a 95 is fine for them. I would have Oregon and Ohio State both at a 94 because I think those two are quite close. I would have Texas where they are at a 92. I would have Clemson and Missouri both at a 91. And then I would have Arizona and Michigan at a 90.
Dang, so Alabama doesn't even crack that top 8 or 9 for you.
Well, if you put Arizona and Alabama, like
I'm not mad at it. I'm just saying that's kind of a crazy thing to say out loud.
It is, but I think it's true. But I think that's really it to talk about with this list. And once again, justice for Mizzou. But now let's move over to the NBA, talk about some free agency moves, kind of run through these pretty quickly. Jason Tatum, first off, max deal, deserved. With how NBA contracts work, deserved.
Yeah, absolutely deserved. And a lot of these guys, you look at the contracts they sign and you're like, oh my goodness, there's no way that guy is worth, in Tatum's case, $60 million. Well, if you look at the market, he actually is worth $60 million. The
NBA contract market
I regret to inform you, all viewers, that NBA contracts are by far the most lucrative at this point in time. Kind of just going down the list. Obviously, we just hit on Tatum signing that max deal coming off that championship with the Boston Celtics. Otherwise on that roster, Derek White with an extension. I believe it was 4 or 5 seasons. I think it was 4.
It's 4.
Around $31.25 million annually, which is a lot of money for a role player, but Derek White is like the ultimate role player right now. Exceptional defense and around 40% from 3 this season. Klay Thompson in a sign and trade to Dallas, 3 years, $50 million. I think this is a really good fit for Klay Thompson. You're going to have some of the best catch and shoot opportunities that he's had since the Kevin Durant era with Steph Curry and the Splash Brothers there in that run between 2016 and 2018. Klay Thompson was able to get a lot of open looks just because of the spacing that Steph Curry and Kevin Durant provided. I think it's kind of similar here because you're going to have Luka at the 1, you're going to have Kyrie at the 2. Those are already like 2 of the most space-creating players in the National Basketball Association. And so Klay Thompson's kind of going to be able to get back to his role in the Kevin Durant Warrior days where he's just going to be able to spot up, catch and shoot wide open 3-pointers. And that's not what he was able to do post his Achilles and ACL injuries when the Warriors just had Steph Curry, and then Klay Thompson was really the number 2 option. And what you'll see in the NBA is going from the number 2 option to the number 3 option is just a huge leap, and it relieves so much pressure from a guy like Klay Thompson, who now doesn't really have to move off the ball quite as much and fight through screens to get open. Defensively, he's going to need to take another step because the Mavericks are already not an excellent defensive team, especially when you're going to have Luka, Kyrie, and Klay on the court at the same time. That means that Klay's going to be slotted in at the 3, so he's going to kind of have to try to get back to his pre-injury defense where he was an elite POA defender. Doesn't quite need to get back to that level, but he definitely needs to be better than he has in the past couple seasons. I think this is an amazing fit for Dallas. I think this is an amazing fit for Klay. I think it's exactly what both sides needed. Dallas in terms of the composition of their team, and Klay just to finish his career strong.
Yeah.
I think he needed to be surrounded by guys like Luka and Kyrie. And honestly, if you asked me to pick today, I would probably have the Mavericks right back in that Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, I could definitely see that for sure. That's understandable for me. Like you said, I love this fit. I think it works really well for him, especially, like you said, taking pressure off is going to be so huge for him. Then Chris Paul completing his Shaq rainbow graphic, going to the San Antonio Spurs to partner with Victor Wembanyama, and that's fun.
It's another really good fit, and I think it's another one that's gonna fly under the radar.
I was surprised because you feel like a guy like Chris Paul wants to be able to win a ring, and
well, I think he's learned that he's just not going to win a ring, and I think he's accepted it.
Up.
So I like this fit a lot, and I don't think this is necessarily going to be a move that makes San Antonio all of a sudden the 6th seed in the West, because I still don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't think the roster is quite talented enough yet, but the Spurs did just draft Stephon Castle, who was the best point guard prospect in what is admittedly a pretty weak draft. But Stephon Castle, as a freshman at UConn, was able to be the starting point guard on a national championship team, and he was surrounded by a lot of veterans. So I think Chris Paul as your mentor, as like a player mentor, that's about the best mentor you can have as a point guard, a young point guard in the National Basketball Association. You pair Chris Paul's leadership with the leadership of Greg Popovich in terms of the development of Wemby and of Stephon Castle. We already know that Chris Paul is incredible at dishing off assists to his teammates. I think we see a lot of Chris Paul lobs to Victor Wembanyama this season. I don't necessarily think it's a sexy or a flashy fit or anything like that, but I think it's a really another situation where it's a really good fit for both San Antonio, who has a lot of young players that need to be mentored, developed, etc., and for Chris Paul, who, let's just face it, he's at the end of his career. He's going to be 38 this season, probably not at the point that he's going to bring a team over the top in terms of contending for the Western Conference title, or let alone the finals. We've already seen his shortcomings in that area, but I really do like this fit for other reasons.
Yeah, I definitely think it makes, like, it's a good fit for the team. Like I said, I was kind of surprised.
Yeah, it's surprising. It's surprising.
I think it's going to be great for the development, like you mentioned. Then, in the move that just combines two things I'm very bored of in the NBA, it's Paul George to the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah, and I can't really fault you for that. I think this is another situation, though, where kind of like, I mean, obviously Paul George is getting a lot more money than Klay Thompson. He's signing a max deal with the 76ers, but that max money doesn't guarantee that he's the number 1 or number 2 option. And quite frankly, Paul George is also going to be the 3rd option for this Philly team. Tyrese Maxey is one of the best young guards in the NBA, and he's only going to get better, in my opinion. Joel Embiid, when healthy, when healthy.
Joel Embiid and Paul George, they're both on the injury
when
list
healthy is not going to last the whole season, obviously, but when this team is healthy, if you have Paul George as your 3rd option, kind of in a similar fashion as Klay, Joel Embiid is the most dominant center inside when he is healthy. That is not a debate. He averaged around 38 points per game this season, didn't qualify for any for any awards just because he didn't hit that 62 game threshold or 58 game threshold, whatever it is. But if this team stays healthy, I could see. I mean, it's unfortunate for the Sixers that teams like the Knicks and the Celtics just continue to get better.
Yeah.
But I think this move is like a little bit underrated as well, in the sense that people are tired of Paul George, and I can't blame them for that. He teams up with Russell Westbrook in Oklahoma City, then teams up with Kawhi Leonard in Los Angeles with the Clippers. Doesn't really win much, doesn't make any pushes to the Western Conference Finals. Doesn't play much. I'll give you that. But if he can stay healthy, and there's obviously a big asterisk there, if he can stay healthy and you have Paul George as your third option as opposed to a guy like Tobias Harris, who is atrocious.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Philly got a lot better. I have concerns about Philly's depth, but I like this move a lot more than I believe the public does.
Well, I mean, fair enough, I guess. We'll have to see what happens. I just don't have any faith in them at all.
That is also fair enough.
And then the next move here is Mikal Bridges traded to the Villanova Wildcats for, the New York Knicks for 5 first-round picks.
Yeah, and this is another thing. Mikal Bridges, definitely worth 5 first-rounders, but
one of my favorite players in the NBA, by the way.
But
obviously, Suns fan. I love Mikal Bridges so much. Bring him back, please.
But if I'm the Knicks, like 5 first-rounders, I'm parting with those 5 first-round picks in the blink of an eye, not only to reunite these guys who have so much chemistry from their days playing at Villanova, but Mikal Bridges is an elite POA defender.
He's so good.
Top 5 in the league.
Mikal Jail is a real thing.
I'm content to say that. He's top 5 POA defender in the league. You have the chemistry aspect, and he can also shoot the ball from 3 pretty well. I'd say a top 3-and-D guy in the league. You pair him with Brunson, with DiVincenzo. You're going to have Josh Hart probably coming off the bench, and I guess you're going to have Mitchell Robinson at center. I think a Knicks and Celtics Eastern Conference Finals would be absolute cinema. I think that series, if both teams are healthy, goes 6 or 7 games, and I could honestly see either team pulling it out. I think Boston, obviously this year, was just way better than everyone else. This is one of those moves that I think kind of turns the East, for me, into a 1A, 1B situation with the Celtics and the Knicks.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I love this Knicks team, the way it's constructed. I'm going to be... Obviously, the Suns are my team that I pull for, but as far as the East goes, I'll kind of have a soft spot for the Knicks this year. I think I like a lot of the guys on this team for sure. And then one final piece of NBA news was the straight-up swap Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey.
Yeah, that was a trade. That was a trade.
That happened. Anyway, last little bit on the NHL free agency there has also started. Quick rundown of a couple major things. First off was the Nashville Predators deciding to spend all of their money at once, picking up Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, Brady Shea, and then signing goalie Yusei Saros to a massive extension. Saros was thought to be off in free agency, maybe helping out another team to really push for a cup like maybe Edmonton, but he stays in Nashville, and now Nashville's looking like a team that might even have the upside of a Western Conference Finals contender, which is a bit crazy to say, but Stamkos added to that main line. Marchessault, too, big contributor for Vegas the last few years. There's a lot of upside with this team now, so I really think Nashville's going to be fun this year. Then Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov to Boston. Rich get richer right there. It's a little bit painful, especially for Vancouver fans. You finally get a good team, then a couple of them get shipped off immediately. Then Linus Ullmark traded from the Bruins to the Senators for a first-round pick, Jonas Korpisalo, and Mark Kastelich. I don't get this move, really. I mean, I get why Ottawa does it, but I just don't think the rest of this Ottawa team is good enough to compete right now in the East, and to give up that much for Linus Ullmark, it's a good move, but why now, in my opinion? The timing doesn't quite make sense. And then finally, had to give a shout out to my San Jose Sharks, who drafted Macklin Celebrini #1 overall, hooray, and then also signed Tyler Toffoli to a 4-year deal, which is going to be like the Lamborghini next to a broken down house meme. And hopefully him and William Eklund will have some good connections this year. But that is it for the NHL and it for the show this week, actually. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you again next week.